Hey guys, tonight we begin our story in the cool mists of ancient Britannia. You're lying in a low thatched hut, the smoke from a dying hearth curling lazily toward the reed covered ceiling. The air is damp thick with the scent of wet earth sheep dung and faintly bitter herbs crushed beneath your sleeping mat. Outside, fog hangs low over the green hills. You can just make out the quiet snort of a restless pony and the distant clank of someone sharpening a blade. Life here is hard, but it's your home. You know every curve of this land, every stream and shadow. You also know the quiet dread that hangs over your village now, the presence of foreign boots stomping through sacred soil. Roman boots. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and I'd love it if you dropped your location and local time in the comments. Always makes my day. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in a region Rome calls Britannia, but you and your people call it something older, something wild and unclaimed. It's the 1st century AD, and while parts of the island are under Roman control, the lands beyond the roads still speak a different tongue. You don't worship Jupiter or carry silver coins stamped with emperors. You offer up to sky gods earth mothers and battle spirits carved in twisted vine-like patterns. You hear rumors, some true, some exaggerated. Roman soldiers flogging nobles for tax resistance. Legionaries laughing as they torch grain stores. Strange gods carved in marble replacing your wooden idols. The world's changing fast, and most of it doesn't feel like progress. You're a member of the Iceni, a tribe in eastern Britain known for its horse breeding and fierce independence. At the center of your world is your queen, Boudica. She's tall, terrifying, and utterly magnetic. You've seen her ride past in her chariot hair, streaming like fire eyes fixed on something far away and dangerous. She speaks with a voice that trembles through bone, and lately she's angry. The tension in the village is like a bowstring drawn too tight. People sharpen sickles and mutter at the hearth. The druids stop chanting and start praying. You notice more warriors training in silence, their eyes like storm clouds. The Romans say they're bringing civilization, roads, baths, taxes. But the locals whisper they're bringing ghosts instead. Your people believe the land remembers everything the Romans apparently don't. One of your neighbors, an old woman who talks to crows and smells faintly of burnt sage, mutters about comets and three-headed calves. Signs, omens, warnings. The gods are stirring, she says, her eyes rimmed with soot. And when the earth wakes, men bleed. Historians still argue whether the tribes were already planning rebellion or if everything unraveled after one key misstep by Rome. But from where you stand, it's less about grand strategy and more about survival. Your tribe had a deal with Rome, a careful balance of loyalty and local autonomy. But that balance is tipping, and the cliff below is steep. One afternoon, you see a Roman tax collector ride into the village. He's flanked by soldiers armored like walking statues. The collector carries scrolls, but the soldiers carry spears. Children are rushed inside. Elders straighten their spines with effort. Boudica isn't there, but her daughters watch from a distance, faces unreadable. The Romans demand more than gold this time. They want land, loyalty, silence. And when someone always refuses, they send a message. It's a message written in bruises and broken things. Later that evening, word spreads like fire. The Romans have beaten your queen, flogged her in public, and abused her daughters. The queen, the symbol, the fire at the heart of your people, brought low. And not just once, deliberately, to humiliate, to remind everyone who holds the leash. You don't sleep that night. No one does. The next morning, Boudica is back. She's not weeping. She's not broken. She's standing in the village square, flanked by her daughters. Her cloak is ragged, her face fierce. There's a silence so deep, you can hear the crows watching from the trees. And she speaks. She doesn't shout. Her voice is calm, measured, clear as cold water. She talks of justice, not revenge, of honor, not hatred. She reminds you who you are, not Romans, not subjects, but warriors, caretakers of sacred land, and you feel it. The air changes, the wind picks up, the crows rise in a screaming spiral. You realize you're not alone in your anger. The whole land is trembling. The Romans think this is the end of a rebellion. But you're just waking up. You're there the day it truly begins. The moment Boudica, no longer just a queen, becomes a force. The village is full, every warrior and widow present. Boudica stands barefoot on a raised stone, her feet streaked with the red clay of your homeland, her copper hair whipping like a banner in the wind. She looks at each of you, not past you, not above you, at you, and then she tells her story, not for sympathy, but for solidarity. She recounts how the Romans stripped her family's dignity, how they thought beating a queen would break a people. Her daughters stand behind her, silent, but unbowed their bruises, not hidden, but worn like war paint. Her voice is the sound of trees splitting in a storm. She invokes the names of lost warriors, sacred rivers, and ancestors who lived free. She speaks not as a monarch, but as a mother of children, born into chains of songs no longer sung. And she asks you directly, will you let this stand? You don't cheer, you howl. And just like that, the sleeping tribes begin to wake. The Iceni are only the beginning. Word spreads through foot messengers, forest paths, and half-burnt signal beacons. Across the foggy moors and wooded valleys, other tribes begin to stir. The Trinovantes, long aggrieved by Roman disrespect. The Catavelloni, whose lands were carved up like venison. Even the normally reserved Cornovii are listening now. You help prepare the messengers, some children, some women, all quick-footed. They carry no weapons, only messages carved into bone cloth or their own memories. Join us. Stand with the queen. Historians still argue whether Boudica's rise was calculated rebellion or divine lightning, an accident of fury and fate. But to you, it feels inevitable, like watching a fire crawl through dry grass. There's no declaration, no trumpet blast, just quiet, furious preparation. The smiths work through the night hammering swords from plowshares and bronze jewelry. Leather workers shape armor from old goat hides. Elders bless arrows dipped in ash. The druids chant deeper into the forest, stirring up the old powers that once guarded these lands. And Boudica rides. Her chariot rattles like a thunderclap across the hills, her daughters always close. Her voice is everywhere. She speaks of sacred groves desecrated, of Roman taxes that starve children, of women treated like cattle, of men whose freedom is worth more than any stone-built bathhouse. And somehow, through sheer gravity, more people come. Farmers who've never held a spear, hunters with pet hawks, former Roman auxiliaries who remember when they too were Britons before they wore Latin names. She doesn't promise victory, she promises vengeance. And something shifts inside you because this isn't about winning anymore. It's about answering a wrong, so old it was carved into stone long before Rome even knew where Britannia was. One night, as you help pack supplies, an elder calls you over. She hands you a pouch of herbs and tells you to smear them under your eyes before battle to see clearer in both life and death. She smiles toothless and adds, "And because you'll look terrifying." A quirky detail you can't shake. Some warriors begin painting blue spirals across their chests and cheeks using ancient woad recipes. It stings like betrayal, smells like coppery sap, and dries to a hue that could shame the sky. By now, the Romans know something's wrong. Patrols go missing. Villages empty out overnight. The roads, those straight, arrogant Roman roads, start to echo with silence. Suetonius Paulinus, the Roman governor, is off fighting druids in Mona, modern-day Anglesey, trying to snuff out native religion. He doesn't see it coming. Not yet. But you do. One morning, Boudica calls for every tribe leader who's joined her. They gather in a half circle of war chariots' banners, flapping like restless birds. No one kneels. No one salutes. This isn't Rome. This is a council of equals, bound by outrage. And Boudica speaks again, no longer asking, but commanding. We will strike them not in the wilds, but in their own towns, where their children sleep, where their temples rise. We will make them feel what it means to burn. It's bold, reckless, perfect. And that's when she says the first city's name, Camulodunum. You've heard the name before. It's the former Roman capital. Now, a peaceful colony full of veterans. An easy target, yes, but also a statement. A former fortress turned complacent, a symbol. You're handed a spear and a length of dried meat. No uniform, no legionary number, just a clear directive ride at dawn. The rebellion is no longer a whisper, it's a scream, and you're part of the storm now. You ride with them thousands now. Tribes that once traded insults are now marching side by side, bound not by politics, but by something older. Shared fury, shared grief. The smoke of old gods rising once again. Your breath turns to fog as you march through pre-dawn mist toward Camulodunum. The Roman veterans inside have no idea what's coming. They've retired here in a town built like a boast, complete with temples, bathhouses, and straight roads laid over sacred land. There's a colossal temple to the Emperor Claudius at the center of it, a marble monolith to the man who claimed your island as his trophy. You hate that temple. The night before the attack, you hear laughter in the Roman streets, soft, distant. You picture them sipping watered wine, trading war stories, completely unaware. They're about to be on the wrong side of one. At sunrise, Boudica gives no long speech. She simply raises her spear. and like wolves with a scent, your army descends. The assault is brutal, efficient. You tear through the wooden palisade past Roman statues that feel laughably out of place in the marshy gloom. The veterans fight back, but they're unprepared. No legion, no fortifications, just faded glory and a few sharp memories. The temple to Claudius becomes their last stand. They barricade themselves inside, praying to a dead emperor. You watch as Boudica rides right up to the base and hurls a flaming brand through the gates. The whole thing goes up like dry thatch. Historians still argue whether Camulodunum's destruction was exaggerated, whether the massacre was as complete as Roman chroniclers claim. But for you standing amid scorched marble and broken swords, there's no doubt. This was not a warning. It was a statement. What makes the attack so shocking isn't just the ferocity, it's the spectacle. No Roman settlement had been erased like this before. You see stone heads of Roman gods rolling in gutters, marketplaces flattened, aqueducts crumbling, and in the ashes, a message. You are not invincible. You helped burn the Roman theater. Ironic, considering no one here has time for drama anymore. A roof collapses with a theatrical puff of smoke, and someone beside you laughs. It's a short, mad laugh, the sound of vengeance with nowhere left to go. The quirky detail that sticks with you, someone drags out a bronze statue of Claudius and replaces its head with a carved turnip. Childish, but weirdly satisfying. By evening, the city is silent. No drums, no cries, just wind blowing through charred beams. And still, Boudica doesn't pause. She doesn't revel. She doesn't even rest. She turns her chariot south toward the next Roman jewel, Londinium. You thought Camulodunum was bold. Londinium is audacious. It's larger, wealthier, and better connected, an emerging hub for trade and Roman bureaucracy. But Suetonius, fresh from his druid burning campaign, has returned. And unlike the veterans, he sees what's coming. He orders the city evacuated. But not everyone gets out. You arrive before dawn. The city lies open, its defenses half abandoned. Smoke from nearby torches makes everything glow orange. Boudica doesn't wait. The attack begins. This time, it feels different, angrier, sharper. The Romans left civilians behind, traders, children, merchants from across the empire. And while the army fled, the memory of what was done to Boudica's daughters has not. You watch as fires consume the wooden piers and warehouses along the Thames. Gold spills from broken chests. Parrots. Yes, actual parrots screech as they escape their cages, adding absurd color to the chaos. And once again, the temple is last. Romans love their temples. You see it collapse in slow motion, like a sandcastle hit by a wave. Historians still argue whether Boudica sanctioned every act of violence in these cities, or whether the uprising grew beyond her control. But the devastation is complete. Londinium. The shining promise of Roman Britain is nothing but ash and echoes. You find a Roman road sign, half-charred, pointing toward Verulamium. And you know it's next. The road to Verulamium is slick with rain and churned soil. Your boots squelch as you walk, shoulders heavy with smoke-stiffened furs. You're tired of marching, of burning, of the endless drumbeat of vengeance. But the fire in Boudica hasn't dimmed. If anything, it's brighter now, like a forge consuming everything it touches. Verulamium is next, a Romanized British town, not a fortress. Its stone forums and Latin-inscribed signs stand in weird contrast to the muddy tracks around it. You wonder, do the locals still think of themselves as Britons? Or have they already forgotten the old gods? The wind carries whispers, nervous rumors that this city might surrender, that the people might open the gates and beg mercy. They don't. By the time you arrive, it's clear. They've chosen Rome. So Boudica chooses fire. Verulamium doesn't even get the thunderclap of a formal assault. It begins with quiet sabotage. Granaries, sabotaged wells, poisoned carts, overturned in alleys. And then before sunrise, your entire army flows in like floodwater. No battle cries, just wet boots and drawn blades. You kick down the door of a baker's shop, expecting resistance. But the place is already empty. Loaves still warm, dough still rising. The people fled, but not far. You hear them later wailing in the woods as they watch the rooftops burn. This city is wealthier than Camulodunum, but not in strength, only in silver art and shame. You watch someone tear down a tapestry of Neptune, replacing it with a crude sigil drawn in charcoal, a wolf devouring a Roman eagle. Historians still argue whether this destruction was strategic or emotional, whether Boudica was trying to break Roman morale or simply torch every trace of empire from the soil. But walking these ruins, it's hard to imagine any plan. It just feels cathartic. And there's a weird moment you'll always remember. Someone finds a Roman scroll of poetry and starts reading it aloud in a mock sermon voice. It's about love in the time of empire. The crowd howls, not in joy, in bitter, exhausted laughter. Still, not everything goes according to plan. The rains return, turning the roads to sludge. Wagons stick, horses tire, supplies vanish. And there are rumors, new ones this time, that the Roman governor Suetonius is gathering what's left of the legions. Boudica hears these rumors with no visible fear. But her scouts report strange movements, Roman convoys moving inland, not out. They're regrouping, strategizing. You realize it too late. Suetonius isn't running. He's preparing. The sky darkens, not just from weather, but from a weight you can't name. It's like the land itself is bracing for something big. And Boudica, she keeps moving. She speaks less now. No more speeches. Just nods, short orders, the occasional hand on a warrior's shoulder. It's not that she doubts. It's that the war has matured. This isn't a glorious revolt anymore. It's a campaign. And like all campaigns, it has a finish line. Your clothes are smoke-soaked. Your eyes sting from ash. And yet you ride. Because you've come this far. You watched 3 cities fall. You saw the unseeable Roman pride shattered like pottery under boot. But Suetonius has stopped running. And that means one thing. The final battle is coming. You're woken by the sound of wheels slicing mud, the unmistakable rattle of Boudica's chariot. The final call has gone out. No more towns. No more temples. The Roman governor has chosen his battlefield. You don't know exactly where, not yet, but the army is moving with purpose now. Westward, into territory, rougher, rockier, more Roman. Everyone can feel it. that taut silence before the storm truly breaks. You travel in a tide of bodies, warriors smeared with ash, women carrying daggers in their belts, even old men gripping staffs with trembling fists. The carts are overloaded, the horses wary, and the sky a dirty gray. It feels less like a march and more like a funeral procession. Whose funeral? Well, that's still undecided. Boudica rides ahead, as always. Her daughters are beside her cloaks, soaked hair unbound. Their eyes are tired but burning. No one speaks of fear, not aloud. But you see it coiled in every clenched jaw, every too tight grip on a spear. And then the rumors start swirling again. Suetonius isn't just regrouping, he's choosing the terrain. Narrow road, steep banks, dense forest to the sides. A place where numbers don't count for as much as discipline. A place that favors Roman tactics. The name of the place is lost to time. Historians still debate where exactly this final stand occurred. But you know one thing, it will be soaked in blood by nightfall. When you finally arrive, you see what Suetonius has done. His troops are arrayed in a defensive wedge, their backs protected by thick woods. In front of them, open plain, just wide enough to funnel an army like yours into a kill zone. It's a trap, a brilliant one. But Boudica doesn't flinch. She rallies the troops in the only way she knows, by standing tall, fiery and furious atop her chariot. She points at the Roman lines and speaks. Not a long speech, not poetic, just hard truth. They took our land, our gods, our children. Make them regret it. And you believe her. Even knowing the odds, you believe her. Historians still debate the numbers. Roman sources claim you're 100,000 strong, maybe more. They say the Romans barely numbered 10,000, but you've seen both armies now, and you know it isn't about numbers anymore. You join the first wave. The signal goes up a horn blast long and low. Your war cry tears from your throat, one voice in a thundering roar. You rush forward, spear in hand, the earth shaking beneath you. And then impact. The Roman front holds. Their shield wall, like an iron cliff, doesn't break. Javelins arc overhead, like a hail of silver wasps. Screams, mud, splinters of bone and wood. You press forward, again and again. Each time fewer return. They're fighting like a machine, methodical, brutal. The wedge formation cuts deep into your massed ranks, and with each step back, your momentum bleeds out. The air turns red. At one point you fall. Someone drags you up. Might have been a cousin. Might have been a stranger. No time to ask. Just time to keep moving. You hear Boudica's voice again, somewhere in the chaos. Not commanding now, just screaming. It's not a battle. It's a reckoning. The quirky detail that sticks in your head even now. One of the Romans drops his helmet in the mud and keeps fighting without it. His bald head is smeared with blue war paint. Your paint. He must have stolen it earlier. And there he is, slashing wildly, a bizarre mirror of your own rage. By midday, it's over. The Roman wedge pushes forward, relentlessly driving you back toward your own wagons. Women and children trapped between iron and retreat. There's nowhere to go. The collapse happens in minutes. A stampede, panic. screams swallowed by the sound of hooves and iron and splintering bone, and then silence. Boudica vanishes in the chaos. Some say she took poison, others that she died in battle sword in hand. Her body is never found. Just the memory, just the echo. You survive barely, but you know this was the moment, the line. The fire met the wall and the wall held. The field still smokes when you stumble away, one of the few not lying among the fallen. The sounds of battle are gone now, replaced by the murmurs of the wounded and the quiet, methodical movements of Roman soldiers finishing what they started. You duck behind a ruined wagon, your chest heaving. The mud is sticky with blood, so much of it you're not sure if it's yours or someone else's. Around you, the bodies stretch in every direction. Friends, foes, horses, all tangled together. A grotesque tapestry of failure. This was supposed to be the moment you broke Rome. Instead, it was the moment Rome broke you. No one speaks Boudica's name at first. It's too raw, too soon. Her chariot is found overturned near the forest edge, one wheel splintered like a snapped oath. There's no sign of her body, just a trail of hoof prints that disappear into the trees. Historians still argue what happened next. Some say she took poison, unwilling to be paraded through Rome in chains. Others believe she slipped away to die quietly among her people. And some, the romantics, think she was taken by the gods themselves, lifted in mist and fire. You want to believe that last one. The Romans don't build a monument. They don't need to. Their monument is the silence that follows. The roads are clear again. The trade resumes. Londinium is rebuilt. Camulodunum rises once more. The empire, like a hydra, simply grows new heads. But something's changed. The survivors are scattered now, hiding in forests and forgotten valleys. You become one of them. You don't shave. You don't speak Latin. You stop walking on Roman roads. Every step feels like betrayal. And still, the stories spread. Whispers of Boudica, of her fury, her fire, her final stand, filter through the hills. They're told by firelight, passed from child to child. Not just of the war, but of the woman who dared challenge an empire with nothing but chariots and rage. The quirky detail you cling to in one burned village, you find a Roman coin with Claudius's face melted half off. Someone scratched a tiny crown into the empty space above his head. A silent, petty act of rebellion. It makes you laugh. Just once. Then you pocket it. You return home eventually, what's left of it. The land is quieter now. Not at peace, but waiting. The Romans don't trust the silence. They build more forts, more roads. They send more governors, more legions. But they also stop pushing quite so hard. They abandon plans for further conquest into Scotland. They allow certain customs to quietly persist. They even stop crucifying druids in public. Historians still debate whether Boudica's revolt actually changed Roman policy, whether her war forced them to rethink how they governed this strange, misty island. But from where you sit, tending your fire, watching Roman patrols march at a careful distance, you know the truth. She didn't win, but she reminded them what losing might feel like. The months crawl by, and still no one speaks her name aloud in Roman towns. Not out of respect, out of superstition. To the soldiers who survived her wrath, Boudica is no longer a woman. She's become a storm, a curse, a warning muttered before sleep. You pass through Londinium again, now partially rebuilt. It's not the shining city it once aspired to be, more like a scar wearing plaster. Burnt beams lie beside fresh-cut timbers. Statues of emperors, once pridefully displayed, are now mounted with reinforced guards. The people walk a little faster here now. There are no songs in the taverns, only whispers and long stares when strangers arrive. Suetonius Paulinus still governs, but his aura has changed. He's no longer the conqueror of druids, the proud general who flattened Mona. Now, he's the man who barely survived Boudica. He tries to reassert Roman strength, conducting more brutal purges, torching suspicious villages, but it backfires. Even the Emperor Nero, safe and smug in Rome, grows uneasy. He sends inspectors. Whispers of Suetonius being too cruel circulate. The irony isn't lost on you. The same empire that once cheered brutality now fears the backlash it breeds. Eventually, Suetonius is replaced by a more diplomatic governor, someone sent to calm Britannia, not crush it. Historians still argue whether this pivot was policy or panic. But the result is clear. Rome starts treading more softly, at least for a while. You see it in subtle shifts. Taxes are lowered in some regions. Local leaders are consulted, if only symbolically. Tribal customs, clothing language, even religious rites are tolerated more openly. It's as if the Romans have remembered what they forgot, that an empire built on scorched earth is always flammable. One day, passing through Verulamium, rebuilt, but never the same, you notice a shrine. It's small, hidden in the woods, just outside town. Not Roman, not officially sanctioned, but carefully tended. A single wooden effigy stands there. A woman, tall, wild hair, no name. But you know who it is. Children come and leave offerings, twisted iron bracelets, carved wolf tokens, even bits of blue woad. You watch in silence as a girl, maybe 8 years old, places a single white stone at the statue's feet and whispers something under her breath. You don't interrupt. You just stand there a moment before vanishing into the woods. The quirky detail that follows you. Someone had carved a Latin phrase into the base of the statue. Nec ignota, nec oblita, not unknown, not forgotten. Back in Roman cities, her name is officially erased. There are no records of her beyond biased Roman chroniclers, no statues, no honors. But the people remember. Not just your people, the tribes, but Romans too. There's an old legionnaire you meet in a market. He has a jagged scar across his cheek and a limp. He sees the blue spiral tattooed on your arm and nods, not with hatred, but with respect. Maybe even envy. She was a storm, he mutters. You don't reply. There's nothing more to say. Time creeps on, and though the fires are long extinguished, you still see their smoke behind your eyes. You begin to wander, not as a warrior now, but as a shadow, moving from tribe to tribe, from Romanized towns to thatched villages clinging to old ways. The land bears the scars. Camulodunum is gone, but its bones remain. You walk through the ruins overgrown now with bramble and moss. Roman columns lie cracked, half swallowed by the earth. Birds nest in what was once a magistrate's house. Every gust of wind sounds like Boudica's chariot echoing through the broken stones. In Londinium, rebuilding continues. The forum buzzes again, and merchants shout prices like nothing ever happened. But the ground beneath them is layered with ash. Deep down, they all know it. That knowledge lingers in how quickly they bolt their doors at night. Then there's Verulamium. You reach the rebuilt city as dusk bleeds across the sky. A statue of a Roman goddess, Minerva perhaps, stands in the square. You stare at it a long time, wondering what gods watched as the city burned. Did they blink? Did they flinch? You walk among the new buildings, half Roman, half local. The streets are tidier, the people quieter. A man offers you a cup of spiced wine and doesn't ask your name. That's how things are now. No questions, no past. Still the stories trickle in. They say a soldier's horse spooked at nothing near the old temple ruins. They say children have dreams of a red-haired woman shouting in a language they don't speak. They say ravens won't land on the road where the final battle took place. Historians still argue whether these tales are memory or myth. But myths are just memories grown wild, aren't they? One night in a small tavern, you meet a storyteller, Roman drunk eager. He leans in and whispers, "There was a woman once who nearly tore down the empire with nothing but rage and a horse." You smile and sip your drink. "She failed?" "Of course," he adds. You shrug. "Did she?" He stares at you puzzled and says no more. The quirky image that stays with you. Someone's painted a crude mural on the tavern's cellar wall. A chariot mid-charge. The horses look like wolves. The driver's face is a blur, but the hair, a vivid streak of ochre red. The city keeps pretending. Everyone does. But there's a silence here now, under the cobbled streets, behind the smooth columns. A low hum beneath Roman ambition. It says you weren't safe then, and you're not safe now. It begins with dreams. The night is restless. You sleep by a low fire in a hill settlement overlooking the river. Smoke curls toward the stars, and in your dreams you see them again, flames rising from Londinium, the twisted wreck of a Roman shield beneath your feet, and Boudica's face, sharp as bone, watching from the mist. You wake with the sense that something's coming, and you're right. The rumors are already spreading omens, they say. Bad ones. Rivers flowing backward. A blood moon that refuses to fade. Sacred springs boiling without cause. Even Roman augurs can't explain it. Inside the forts, soldiers whisper about a woman screaming in Latin near the gates, except when they look, there's no one there. You travel through settlements that used to be Iceni, strongholds now patrolled by Roman auxiliaries. Their walls are cleaner, their roads more precise, but their temples empty, deserted. It's as if something frightened the gods away. The superstitions intensify. A temple in Londinium collapses with no wind. A statue of Jupiter melts in a fire that no one remembers lighting. A centurion refuses to leave his barracks after claiming to see Boudica's chariot blazing across the clouds. Historians still debate the accuracy of these accounts. Were they real misinterpreted natural disasters, or did fear itself become contagious? You don't care. You feel it in the dirt, in the wind. It's not over. Rome may have won, but they didn't bury what they thought they buried. Boudica's rebellion was never just swords and torches. It was a scream. And you can't unhear a scream once it echoes across generations. Even in Rome itself, strange reports surface. A senator reportedly dies from a fit after mocking a Britannic envoy. Nero refuses to celebrate his victory in public. He even removes a planned statue meant to commemorate the pacification of Britannia. That tells you everything. Meanwhile, the common people. They begin crafting their own legends. In the marketplaces, children sing songs of a red-haired queen who rides with wolves and never dies. Fishermen toss blue stones into rivers to ward off Roman patrols. And then there's the forest. You enter it one morning, not intending to stay long, but the shadows swallow the path, and you realize this is one of the groves the Druids once used. Charred stumps remain from when Suetonius tried to destroy it all. But something grew back. You find symbols scratched into bark. Spirals, spears, eyes, and in the center, a fresh carving Vindicta Reginae, the Queen's vengeance. The quirky moment hanging from a tree tied with dyed wool is a Roman sandal. Just one. Tiny child-sized. A silent offering. Or a warning. You stay a while longer. Not because you're waiting, but because you know they are. Then at last, the inevitable Suetonius strikes back. You hear it first in panicked whispers. A fortified town, razed for harboring rebel survivors. A line of tribal elders crucified outside Verulamium. And then a message pinned to a tree near your settlement in crisp, practiced Latin. There will be no more tolerance, only Rome. It's signed with Suetonius's name, but you know it's not just him. It's the empire reasserting itself. You expect fear, you expect retreat, but that's not what happens. Instead, the people dig in. The tribes scatter into the forests, not in surrender, but in secrecy. They hide their relics, bury their blades, and teach their children how to remember what Rome tries to forget. This isn't a rebellion anymore. It's something slower, colder, like winter settling into bone. You join them in building hidden shrines. One is carved inside a hollowed-out oak. Another lies beneath a bog, wrapped in woven rush mats. All carry the same emblem, a woman in profile chariot wheels beneath her feet, hair blowing in a direction the wind doesn't follow. The Romans respond with cruelty. They sweep through village after village, demanding loyalty, punishing resistance. They destroy fields, take hostages. You see whole families loaded into carts like so much cattle headed for Londinium, never to return. Historians still argue whether these crackdowns were official policy or rogue vengeance from humiliated legionnaires. But you see no difference. The results are the same. And still, they can't erase her. One fort is found abandoned, Roman standards trampled into the mud. In their place, someone has scratched a single line into the gate with a blade. She will return. Even the soldiers begin to flinch at her name. Superstition becomes protocol. Some refuse to camp near battlefields linked to her rebellion. Others whisper that Boudica's ghost rides during storms. There's a curious new trend. Roman helmets are found deliberately defaced, left upside down at shrines. No blood, no bodies, just the helmets dented in at the crown, as if bowed. Suetonius grows more paranoid. He tightens supply lines, doubles patrols, sends spies into forests where no one returns. His once legendary composure cracks. At one point, he reportedly lashes out at a subordinate during a parade because the man mistakenly painted his shield with red spirals, the same blue-red pattern Boudica's warriors wore. The quirky detail that sticks with you: in a Roman bathhouse, you see graffiti carved in careful, childlike Latin. It reads Domus Romana Regina Nox Sest. Rome is a house, and the queen is the knight. You leave before anyone can ask who carved it. As the season turns, Suetonius is recalled to Rome. The official reason: failure to restore confidence. He leaves quietly. No triumph, no procession. Just one ship slipping away through fog. And when the new governor arrives, Julius Alpinus Classixianus, his first order is not war. It's silence. He demands public calm, private compliance. He removes the crucified bodies, reduces taxes, offers pardons. For the first time in years, Roman officials ask instead of command. It's not peace, but it's an ending, sort of. You don't know it at the time, but that last Roman maneuver, the shift from iron to silence, is the final page of the rebellion. The open war is over, but something else takes its place. A quieter resistance, one that seeps into the bones of the land. You begin to see her not in statues, but in carvings on pottery shards left at crossroads. Not in scrolls, but in lullabies mothers whisper in corners of smoky huts. Not in grand speeches, but in the glint in someone's eye when they say, "Remember what she did." The forest paths you once walked now host stone markers, low, unassuming, half swallowed by ivy. But when you lean close, you see the same glyph again. A spiral, a wheel, a woman's silhouette with arms outstretched, always facing east. Suetonius may be gone, but the legions remain. They march tighter now, less swagger in their stride. When they enter a village, they do so slowly, carefully, as if the ground itself might remember what they did. They try to stamp it out. Of course they do. Rome always does. Scrolls that mention her are burned or hidden. Roman historians like Tacitus write of her with disdain, pity, fear. They paint her as a wild woman, furious, irrational, barbaric. They try to claim her uprising was a tragic error, a warning against letting women lead. Historians still debate how much of this narrative was political spin, whether the records were deliberately shaped to turn Boudica into a cautionary tale instead of a caution to Rome itself. But the people know better. You hear songs sung in twilight, their verses twisted over time but unmistakable. She rode with fire. She rode with bone. She rode till Rome stood not alone. You hear that one in a fishing village. A boy no older than 10 singing it while skipping stones. In one town, a mosaic floor is discovered beneath a burned villa. It's Roman in style, but strange. One tile bears the faint outline of a chariot. No horses, just wheels in motion. And under it, written in broken Latin, mulier quae non servivit, the woman who did not serve. You watch a Roman governor walk across it and not notice. But you do. The quirky moment that seals the memory in the marketplace of a reconstructed Londinium. A merchant hands you a carved amulet shaped like a wheel polished smooth. You raise an eyebrow. He smiles, lowers his voice. "Don't say her name," he says. She hears it. You don't buy the amulet, but you don't walk away from his stall empty-handed either. The final battle may have ended in blood and loss, but something lingers. Boudica didn't vanish. She spread. Through soil, through story, through every clink of sword against shield in the training yards of Rome's colonies. They thought they won. They forgot who taught them how to lose. Years drift by, like leaves on the river's surface, quiet, steady, forgetful. The Roman grip on Britannia never fully loosens, but it never quite tightens again either. There's an edge missing now, a certain imperial arrogance burned away with Camulodunum's ashes. But as the empire builds amphitheaters and sculpts new gods, you know the real question is still unanswered. Where is Boudica? You return to the final battlefield, what's left of it. The grass has grown tall, the bones taken by animals or buried deep. No cairn, no stone, no shrine. Just wind across the plain. You search the trees at the edge where her chariot was last seen. Nothing, but in the roots of an ancient yew, you find something strange. A single bronze pendant shaped like a spearhead wrapped in frayed leather. You take it. You don't tell anyone. Historians still argue whether her body was ever found. Roman accounts are vague. Some say she was cremated in secret. Others claim she poisoned herself with hemlock, the dignified Roman death. Some even insist she lived out her days hidden among sympathetic tribes, a ghost queen. You hear all the stories. You collect them. One traveler swears his grandmother once saw a red-haired woman watching from a cliff years after the war, her eyes like thunderclouds. Another says a bard once heard a low whisper in the woods while composing a song. No words, just presence. A local healer swears her herb garden grows stronger where she buried a lock of reddish hair tied with wolf sinew. The Romans, desperate to retake control of the narrative, build their own monuments. Stone arches celebrating peace. Coins showing Britannia kneeling at Rome's feet. But even on those coins, the woman's eyes look defiant. They want to make her a footnote, but instead, she becomes a question. In one coastal town, you visit a stone circle used only during solstices. You hear drums that match your heartbeat. The old ways, the quiet ways, still live. You sit with them, eat their fire-roasted root vegetables, and listen to a chant slow, low, looping. Queen who rode, queen who fell, queen who waits. You don't ask who taught them the words. And then there's the mural. Not Roman, not Celtic. Something newer carved into a cave wall just above a river ford. You need a torch to see it. A procession of women in long cloaks, their eyes like moons, their hands bearing torches, and leading them, a figure in a chariot. Wild hair, arms out. The wheels beneath her catch the firelight and seem to turn. You stand there for a long time. The quirky detail that stays with you, one of the figures in the mural has a Roman gladius strapped to her back, but it's upside down. Not in surrender, in memory. You trace your fingers along the stone, and you whisper her name, not as a battle cry, as a benediction. Rome, ever pragmatic, does what it does best, adapts. In the years after Boudica's rebellion, policies shift. Harsh punishments soften. Governors are selected not for their brutality, but for their ability to soothe. Britannia becomes a land of cautious smiles and repaired roads. Forts spring up like hedges. Trade resumes. Taxes resume. Life resumes. But underneath the newly paved forums and villas with underfloor heating, something older breathes. You see it in the eyes of the people. The way they look at Roman soldiers, not with fear anymore, but calculation. The way they gather in circles just out of sight, voices low, smiles guarded. There's something still smoldering beneath the surface. The rebellion didn't end, it settled. The Romans try to rewrite the past. They distribute new maps, ones that erase Iceni territory. They commission histories that describe Boudica as a tragic fool. They teach children to say peace when they mean order. Historians still debate how far this rewriting went. Some claim certain Roman records were deliberately destroyed or amended. Others suggest Nero himself issued a directive forbidding future mention of Boudica in official inscriptions. But none of it matters. You can't erase a name carved in blood and smoke. One day, walking through a Romanized town square, you see a mosaic in progress. Artisans are carefully setting stones, blues and greens, a seascape with ships. You ask what they're making. Britannia in chains, one replies, barely looking up. But later, when no one's watching, a young assistant adds a single tile, bright red, into the waves behind her. Just one. And you notice. You pass through villages where Roman villas have ivy creeping over them, where Celtic festivals are celebrated in secret. In one town, the children play a game called Chariot Queen. One child rides a broken barrel, while the others pretend to be Romans trying to stop her. She always wins. There's a line you hear in whispered conversation, usually at night over shared jugs of bitter ale. We may wear their cloaks, but we speak our dead's names. You meet others who remember. Gray-haired survivors with blue tattoos faded to shadows. They don't tell stories to impress anymore. They tell them to remind. And when they speak of Boudica, it's never with grief. Only awe. One elder says it best Rome thought they killed her, but they only scattered her. You stay in a town built near the ashes of Camuleodunum. The new settlement has no Roman name. They call it Ash Hollow. Quiet. Simple. The fields there grow stronger than anywhere else, locals say. Some believe it's because of what was buried beneath bone iron resolve. The quirky moment you carry with you, a woman gives birth during the full moon under a yew tree. They name the girl Boda, not Boudica, just a whisper of it. But enough. You hold the child once swaddled in wool. She stares up with impossible calm. And you wonder, what happens the next time the chariot wheels turn? Centuries pass and Rome fades. Not all at once. No great collapse, no single disaster. But like frost melting under spring light. The legions thin out. The governors grow weaker. The roads crack. And one day, you look around and realize they're gone. The empire that once ruled the known world. It's now ruins, moss-covered and silent. But she's still here. Boudica. You hear her name again this time, not in secret, but in song. Minstrels on dirt paths strum harps and recite verses of the warrior queen who defied the world's greatest army. Each version is a little different. Sometimes she rides a lion, sometimes she flies, sometimes she's a ghost, sometimes a goddess. You attend a gathering in a stone churchyard where a monk preaches fire and repentance. Then in the corner, another monk with ink-stained fingers passes you a parchment with a different kind of tale, one of a queen who fought for justice, not for God or gold, but for her daughters. Historians still argue when the myth overtook the woman. whether Boudica ever really rode with wolves or summoned storms. But that's not the point anymore. She's become legend. The Normans arrive. They build castles, scribble Latin on stone, declare new kings. But they too hear the whispers. You catch a knight once late at night staring into the forest, as if expecting hooves to thunder from the trees. In Elizabethan England, the poets rediscover her. They romanticize her fury, paint her as a noble savage. In plays, she becomes Britannia incarnate, a wild-haired emblem of resistance. Scholars begin to study her again, though always through the lens of empire. And then come the Victorians. They fall in love with her. Not the real her, the furious, vengeful queen who burned cities, but a sanitized vision. A mother of empire. A symbol of righteous rebellion. They sculpt her in marble, place her in classrooms, name ships after her. They forget the ashes. They only see the crown. In 1902, a statue of Boudica is erected in London, near Westminster Bridge. Just yards from Parliament, she stands tall in her chariot daughters, by her side bronze wheels poised to roll. You go see it. Of course you do. The statue is grand, the craftsmanship precise, but something's missing. Her eyes are cold, her rage polished away. She looks calm. The quirky moment you overhear a schoolchild whisper to her friend, "Why does she look so polite? Didn't she burn everything?" You chuckle, quietly, then walk on. The real Boudica isn't in the statue. She's in the cracks in the cobblestones, the winds that race through old battlefields, the songs sung by children who don't remember where they learned the words. She didn't need to win to endure. She simply had to fight. Now you stand in the heart of modern London. The city pulses beneath your feet. Double-decker buses grumble. Past neon signs flicker in the drizzle. Tourists photograph everything and understand nothing. The air is filled with diesel and ambition. And yet, beneath it all, something ancient hums. You pause at Westminster Bridge. Cars honk behind you. River Thames, muddy and relentless, slides past like time itself. There she is. The bronze statue of Boudica looms nearby. Her chariot mid-charge, her daughters rigid beside her. Tourists snap photos. A child asks if she was a queen or a monster. The parent answers, "A hero, I think." You step closer. The plinth reads Boudica and her daughters. A Romanized name, but you forgive it. History has always mispronounced her. You stare at the chariot wheels, their spokes frozen mid-motion. They haven't turned in 2,000 years, and yet here you are, still hearing them. Somehow, you expected more. Fire, thunder, defiance carved in bronze. But the statue is tidy, composed. The city around it moves on indifferent. Glass towers rise behind her. Parliament glints nearby, another empire with its own contradictions. Still, she stands. Historians still argue whether this version of Boudica, this symbolic, sanitized matron of British resistance, honors or distorts the real woman. They debate her tactics, her legacy, her motives. But you know better. You've walked the ashes of Camulodunum, heard songs by hidden fires, held bone charms strung on wolf sinew. You remember. You cross the bridge, feet echoing softly. A busker strums a guitar beneath a streetlight. He plays something minor slow. You don't recognize the tune, but the rhythm feels like hooves. And then you hear it, far off, faint but real. A woman's laugh, sharp as flint, carried on the wind. The quirky final image you carry carved into the wooden slats of a riverside bench is a not Boudica, just she rode. You smile, because yes, she did. And maybe beneath the city of forgetting she still does. Especially here, where history flickers like candlelight, and not every leader kept their sword tucked in a man's belt. You're lying down. The room is dim, and in your ears floats a murmur from centuries ago. You're lying down. The room is dim, and in your ears floats a murmur from centuries ago. Of women leading tribes, making laws, and defending borders, long before anyone in Rome had heard of Boudica. You probably won't survive this world, not because of war or famine, but because of how embarrassingly unprepared we are to navigate a society where women wield public power as casually as a spear. Picture yourself waking up in an Etruscan village. The rooftops are red-tiled. The air smells like iron and fig bark, and nobody blinks when the mayor, high priestess, and general all happen to be the same middle-aged woman named Thania. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the empire. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The Etruscans, a mysterious people of central Italy, were once Rome's stylish older cousin. Better hygiene, richer tombs, and a baffling fondness for elaborate shoes. And their women, they dined with men, they owned land, they conducted ceremonies. To the later Romans, this was scandalous. Immoral, they whispered, unnatural. But to the Etruscans, it was just Tuesday. You shuffle past painted tombs, depicting banquets where women recline alongside men, sipping from the same goblets, their jewelry glittering like dew on a laurel tree. Historians still argue whether Etruscan gender roles were truly equal or just unusually relaxed. But the gossip in Roman literature makes one thing clear. These women had presence. And Rome hated that. Now shift your weight eastward to the steppe winds of Scythia. You're on horseback, no saddle, just fur and muscle between you and the earth's thrum. Beside you rides a woman with a bow longer than her leg and a braid thick as a whip. The Greeks called them Amazons, part myth, part menace. But archaeological digs tell a sleepier truth. These weren't fairy tales. These were mothers buried with arrowheads and mirror compacts, warrior queens with chariot scars and hairpins in the same grave. Roman writers flinched at the thought. Women in war, a civilization where matriarchs led migrations and raiding parties, nonsense. But coins and bones disagree. Meanwhile, in the lush cold of pre-Roman Gaul and Britain, Celtic women debated in council fires and summoned spirits from mist-covered hills. Your feet sink into peat. A chiefess with blue woad across her brow nods at you welcoming. She doesn't smile. She doesn't need to. When Rome came knocking, these societies didn't just fall. They bent, flared, and in some cases whispered back with knives in their sleeves. The matriarchs didn't vanish. They adapted. Some fought in shadow, some through prophecy, some through marriage. But all had a lesson to leave behind. So here we begin, not with the fall of female power, but with the slow, scraping resistance against the Roman boot. You'll see that Boudica wasn't alone, or even the first. She was the spark everyone remembers. But the fire, it had always been smoldering beneath. You're on a dusty road now, somewhere east of the Red Sea, brushing wind-blown grit off your sleeves. Palm trees line the route like weary sentries, and camels blink slowly in the heat. You've arrived in the Nabatean kingdom, a shimmering desert puzzle that knew how to survive long before Rome ever tried to redraw the map. Here trade is power. And the women. They're everywhere behind market stalls, inside walled courtyards, negotiating incense contracts, even managing caravans that stretch for miles. Unlike in Rome, Nabatean women sign documents, control property, and fund religious buildings with their own names engraved in stone. No husband required. One inscription worn by time but still legible lists a certain Queen Abishag, landowner, temple patron, an all-around logistics expert. She didn't raise a sword. She didn't ride into battle. But she knew the trade routes like she knew her children's footsteps. When Roman merchants tried to undercut the locals, she redirected traffic, literally. Nabatean traders rerouted goods away from Roman ports. A quiet embargo, desert style. Historians still argue whether these merchant matriarchs acted with political intention or simply protected their interests, but the effect was unmistakable. Rome found itself stymied by a force it couldn't stab: economic resistance. You move through Petra's curved sandstone passageways, the walls glowing rose gold in the late sun. This wasn't just a city, it was a statement. We control the wealth under your feet. And behind that statement often was a woman signing, sealing, and delivering Rome a firm "not today." One scroll fragment, crumbling, but legible references a queen who ordered water to be diverted from a Roman outpost to irrigate Nabatean fields. No war horns, just valves and leverage. Now imagine being a Roman ambassador sent to negotiate only to be outbargained by a woman who owns more camels than you've seen in your life. Rome could conquer a lot, but it couldn't out-haggle a desert queen. And this, dear listener, is how resistance begins, not with fire, but with receipts. It's quiet now. Not the silence of peace, but the hush before a gasp. You're in central Anatolia, where the Galatian hills roll like tired shoulders under an overcast sky. Here, tucked behind temple columns and tangled underbrush history, whispers the name Kama. Kama isn't a general. She isn't a warrior queen. She's a priestess, cloaked in white eyes like wet stone and voice barely louder than breath. But in her silence lies an act of defiance that would ripple through Roman occupied lands, like a pebble dropped into a sacred spring. The story, half legend, half shadowed fact, unfolds like this. Kama was married to Senatuus, a Galatian noble who believed in alliances built on respect, not submission. That made him inconvenient. Enter Sinorix, ambitious, Roman-backed, and not above a little murder. He kills Senatus, takes Kama's hand by force, and expects compliance. Kama complies. Sort of. On the day of their wedding, really more of a merger, Kama performs the ritual herself. In front of the gods, the nobles, and a gathering thick with barely restrained scorn, she raises a ceremonial cup of honeyed wine. You imagine the clink of metal as she drinks, then offers it to him. He drinks. They both collapse. This wasn't rebellion with trumpets or battlefields. It was quiet, devastating, and deeply Roman in its irony. They admired stoicism, didn't they? Historians still debate whether Kama's tale is true or allegorical. Some call her a martyr, others an assassin in ceremonial robes. But the tale was popular enough to make it into Plutarch's writings, where it reads like a morality play soaked in blood and myrrh. Kama's act doesn't spark a war. No legions are summoned, but it plants something subtler in the minds of those under Roman rule, that a single woman without raising her voice could rewrite the ending. And maybe, just maybe, you don't need an army. You need a cup of vow and the patience to let vengeance ferment. Now let the Rhine mist wrap around your shoulders. You stand on a muddy riverbank, watching barges drift lazily downstream. Somewhere beyond the trees, a legionnaire stumbles spooked, not by sword, but by prophecy. This is the land of the Bructeri, and from their ranks rises a name that would keep Roman generals up at night, Veleda. She doesn't lead troops. She doesn't even show her face in public. Instead, she lives in a tower, high secluded, where only a single intermediary ever hears her speak. But what she says changes everything. Veleda's visions are more than superstitions. They come during a time of rising revolt, the Batavian Rebellion. A local uprising becomes something more when her words begin to spread. Victory will come, she whispers. Rome will bleed. The rebels listen, and for a moment Rome does bleed. You sit in a tent with Roman envoys who must now negotiate with a woman they can't see. They write their messages, send them up a slope, and wait for replies. The unease is palpable. This wasn't how diplomacy was supposed to work. Where's the senator, the governor, the sensible hierarchy? Instead, they find themselves petitioning a woman cloaked in mystery and hailed as a divine messenger. Historians still argue whether Veleda truly wielded that much influence, or if the Bructeri simply used her as a spiritual figurehead. But the Romans believed in her power enough to capture her. When they did, they didn't parade her in chains like a common rebel. No, she was treated as something in between hostage and oracle, valuable, dangerous, unknowable. Imagine the panic among Roman ranks, not from swords, but from a sentence delivered by a woman behind a wall. That's Veleda's genius. Her rebellion isn't just tactical, it's psychological. She makes the mighty empire feel watched, judged, and profoundly human. You leave the Rhine banks shivering, not from cold, but from the soft weight of prophecy pressing on your spine. You find yourself beneath a gray British sky, ankle deep in wet turf, the smell of peat and betrayal thick in the air. Ahead stands a woman with red gold hair bound into a crown of braids. Her name is Cartimandua, and history rarely knows what to do with her. She didn't burn Roman forts like Boudica. She didn't die in glorious defiance. Instead, she survived, and for that many called her a traitor. But let's pull closer. Peel back the image of the queen who betrayed. What if Cartimandua wasn't a coward, but a strategist? As queen of the Brigantes, the largest tribe in Britain, she was faced with a choice when Rome came: resist and risk obliteration. or collaborate and keep her throne, her people, and her neck. She chose the latter, but she didn't give Rome everything. She gave just enough. She famously handed over Caradicus, a British resistance hero, to the Romans. To some, that was treason. To others, a cold, calculated move to keep the legions away from her own hills. Her reign was riddled with power plays. She divorced her husband, always a bold move in tribal society, and took up with his armor-bearer. That decision sparked a civil war, but she still held the throne, backed quietly by Roman muscle. Historians still argue whether Cartimandua was coerced, clever, or both. Tacitus wrote about her with thinly veiled disdain, but he couldn't ignore her influence. She ruled longer than Boudica. She kept her lands largely intact, and she understood something most rebels didn't. Rome had weaknesses, but they weren't always military. You imagine her now, standing on a ridge, watching Roman banners flutter, and calculating, always calculating. She didn't need to love the empire. She just needed to outlast it. In a world that praised dramatic resistance, Cartimandua's survival felt almost offensive. But maybe survival was the loudest rebellion of all. Now, journey southwest to the craggy spine of Lusitania, modern-day Portugal, where the nights fall hard and fast and the land whispers with footfalls that vanish before dawn. Here in this rugged terrain, Rome met not an army, but shadows with braids. They called them bandits, raiders, savage women, one Roman scribe sneered. But what they encountered were the night riders, female guerrilla fighters who struck from darkness and melted into the hills like ghosts. No formal records list their names, no medals, no statues, but the fragments remain. Letters from centurions grumbling about ambushes, scorched supply lines, patrols vanishing along cliffside roads. You squat beside a smoldering fire ring. A Roman helmet lies cracked nearby, abandoned. The ground is too rough for cavalry, too unpredictable for formation drills. And that's exactly why the night riders thrived. They used terrain like a second weapon. With knowledge passed down through generations, secret trails, hidden caves, moss patterns on stone, they moved faster than any legion. And when they struck, it wasn't grand, it was efficient. One soldier pulled from his post, a torch lit in the wrong camp, supplies poisoned. Historians still debate whether these women were part of a coordinated movement or a scattered surge of tribal vengeance. But the effects were felt across the empire. Rome had planned for battles, not 1,000 paper cuts. And unlike many male warriors, these women had no need for honor in death. They preferred to vanish. You close your eyes and hear the wind hissing between rocks. Maybe it's just the wind, or maybe it's the breath of someone watching, deciding whether to let you pass. Rome never fully pacified Lusitania. The land was too wild, the resistance too stubborn. And somewhere in that wilderness, women rode beneath moonlight, part myth, part memory, wholly terrifying. The sands of North Africa crunch beneath your boots, now hot, brittle, and whispering with secrets. You're in Numidia, a land once ruled by Berber kings and now carved by Rome's ambition. But beneath the smooth lines of Roman roads lies something tangled, a web of silent resistance woven not with swords, but with eyes and whispers. And at the center of many threads, women. They don't wear armor. They wear veils. Their battlegrounds are not plains, but doorways, wells market alleys. In a fractured landscape where tribes are bribed, split, and turned against one another, women become the invisible messengers of a very visible rebellion. You're sitting inside a shaded mud brick room. An old woman pours you tea. Her hands weathered her bracelets, silent. But when she hands you the cup, there's a scrap of parchment tucked beneath it. Directions, a name, a warning. This is espionage disguised as hospitality. Rome tried to dominate by cutting alliances and imposing client kings. But what it couldn't stop were the wives, daughters, and sisters who passed information under the guise of errands. One tribal leader was assassinated with knowledge passed through 6 courtyards, and not a single man involved knew all the steps. Historians still argue whether these were acts of organized rebellion or simply survival in the chaos Rome left behind. But Roman records refer repeatedly to suspicious women servants with too many questions and gossip that cost lives, which suggests Rome feared something it couldn't map the network. Even among Roman officials, some wives of provincial governors were quietly feeding information to local tribes. Pillow talk, yes, but with tactical consequences. Now you're in a silent grove, the trees still and dry. A figure passes behind you, quick-hooded, humming softly. You don't look back. Because here, knowledge kills quicker than steel. And in Numidia, every whisper carried a blade. You drift next into the candlelit hush of a Roman temple, the incense thick and cloying. Beneath the marble columns, people murmur, kneel, and pause. Not for an emperor, not even for Jupiter, but for a woman whose words are older than any coin. These are the Sibyls, Rome's own sacred women keepers of prophecy, veiled in mystery, and feared even by the most hardened generals. You're not in some fringe province now. You're in the heart of the empire. And yet the power held by these women could tilt decisions, halt armies, and undo emperors. The Sibylline book scrolls, consulted in times of crisis, were said to come from the mouth of the Cumaean Sibyl herself, a prophetess who lived in a cave and aged backward in people's memories. No senator dared question the scroll's authenticity. If a Sibyl said, "Bury a foreigner under the forum Rome dug," if she said, "Send an offering to Delphi ships sailed," historians still argue whether these women ever held true authorship over the texts, or if priests used their names as political cover. But what's clear is this: when things fell apart, Rome turned to the Sibyls, not swords. Sometimes, though those prophecies weren't helpful, they were ambiguous, poetic, and unsettlingly specific in ways that hinted at discontent. One record tells of a warning: beware the bird that mimics speech, for it comes in foreign feathers. The Senate grew paranoid. Was it about Gaul? Or someone within? You wander through the temple's side passage where a priestess chants in low tones. Her words make your neck prickle. They're meant to soothe, but underneath, they tremble with something deeper, a critique wrapped in ritual. Rome depended on the Sibyls, yet feared them. Because when power rests on law and order, and a whisper in verse can shake a province, then you've handed the matchbox to someone in sandals. And in this empire, even holy women could light a fuse. Step now into the smoky dusk of a forest shrine where offerings lie scattered at the feet of weathered idols. bones bread, and braids of hair. The air tastes of pine and ash. Here beyond Rome's borders, and even within them, once stood the unchallenged guardians of divine chaos, the priestesses. You see her across the fire, barefoot, smeared in ochre eyes like polished obsidian. She is not tame, not diplomatic. She is pagan fury given form, and when Rome builds altars in her woods, she doesn't protest. She calls down storms. Before Christianity rewrote the rulebook, spiritual power was not the domain of organized clergy. It belonged to the wild-eyed women who spoke for the gods, or maybe were the gods depending on the village. From Gaul to Thrace to Illyria, the female religious figure wasn't ceremonial. She was political, social, and often armed. When Rome arrived, they offered citizenship and coin. But what do you give a woman whose power comes from trees and thunder? Historians still argue how organized these priestess networks were, but Roman texts mention multiple temples torched not by invading armies, but by the very women who ran them. One tale tells of a grove burned to the roots by its own guardians, rather than let a Roman garrison desecrate it with order. And these were not isolated outbursts. In times of revolt, these priestesses often became war counselors, using dreams and blood rites to rally tribes. Their followers didn't just see rebellion, they saw prophecy. Rome labeled them witches, heretics, subversives, but behind closed doors, even Roman nobles sent coin to these women for fertility charms and wartime blessings. Because when fire flickers just right, you don't care who calls the wind, so long as it doesn't blow against you. Now, the shrine grows cold, the idol crumbles, but under your feet roots still twist. And the priestesses, they never left. They simply slipped beneath the floorboards of empire. The room shifts no longer shrine or battlefield, but a banquet hall somewhere between marble and mistrust. Rome at its core was built not just on conquest, but on deals, and tonight's deal involves silk olives and a bride with a secret. Across empires, one of Rome's oldest strategies was marriage. Take a local chieftain's daughter, dress her in linen and gold, and send her into the lion's den, called a wedding. She would smile toast and sleep beside the man tasked with conquering her homeland. But what Rome didn't always count on was what she carried beneath the silk, a knife, a plan, and an impeccable memory. These women, never called rebels, rarely remembered by name, served as unofficial diplomats, translators, informants. One record tells of a Dacian princess who stalled Roman campaigns by feeding false dates to her new husband's messengers. Another mentions a Gallic noblewoman who poisoned Roman wine while pregnant, securing her child's throne. Historians still argue whether these were anomalies or part of a larger pattern. The evidence is scattered letters, warnings, intercepted gifts, but the theme persists in the age of empire. Every embrace could be espionage. You're at a banquet now. Gold dishes glint. A Roman senator laughs too loudly. Beside him, his young wife tilts her cup and catches your eye. You notice her hand beneath the tablecloth. Calm, still, tensed. There's a reason Roman men often distrusted foreign brides. Some went on to become mediators between empire and resistance. Others passed maps, troop counts, and codes through pillow talk and late-night confessions. The silk made them invisible. The ring made them dangerous. They didn't scream, didn't march. They sat, smiled, and shifted the borders of power, one whisper at a time. And in a world obsessed with monuments, they preferred to carve their legacies into choices no one would see until it was far too late. Now the path narrows. You're off the map, literally. No Roman road leads here. You're walking between pine trunks in some uncharted stretch of woodland where tribal banners flutter quietly behind smoke from an unseen fire. This is the world of sisters, bound not by borders, but by blood. You're in the network. When Rome expanded, it assumed everything could be divided, that provinces were separate, that tribes could be bought, that loyalty could be mapped like grain routes. What they didn't factor in was kinship, especially the kind held together by women. Across Gaul, Illyria, the Balkans, and Germania, female relatives linked tribes like veins under skin. A woman might marry across valleys, but she didn't forget her cousins in the highlands. And when trouble came, when Rome burned a village or imprisoned a leader, those relationships stirred. One Roman administrator wrote of a sudden, inexplicable coordination between distant clans. What he missed was the messenger, a sister with a horse and a woven story. A mother who passed coded complaints into lullabies. An aunt who held a family grudge longer than any governor's term. Historians still argue how centralized these alliances were. But burial sites reveal repeated patterns. The same jewelry designs, protective charms, even shared gods spanning hundreds of miles. A whispered alliance held together not by treaty, but by grandmothers. And when a Roman outpost fell mysteriously overnight, sometimes the culprit wasn't a general. It was the result of a dozen conversations over bread ovens of women deciding it was time to act not for glory, but because someone had hurt their niece. You sit now, near a fire surrounded by laughter, but you can feel it beneath the warmth is information flowing faster than any scroll. This is the kind of resistance you can't crucify. Because Rome might conquer cities, but it never cracked the code of sisterhood. Now, step into marble silence, columns reaching skyward, oil lamps flickering against worn frescoes. This is Macedonia, once proud and imperial, now a civilized region in Rome's books. But below the statues and treaties, the resistance never quite died. It just changed its clothes. Here, rebellion wore tunics, not armor. You're in a modest villa near Pella. There's a woman at the loom, not weaving cloth, but weaving words into young minds. She's a teacher, but her curriculum includes the memory of Philip, of Alexander, of freedom. Her name doesn't appear in histories, but the questions she plants, they spread like ivy through cracks in empire. These were the resistors in the shadows, Macedonian and Greek women who didn't storm gates, but opened them from within. Herbalists treating sick Roman guards with sleeping potions, widows slipping messages inside funeral wreaths, daughters trained in poisons and philosophy. Historians still debate whether these women were coordinated or simply concurrent. But in a region the Romans considered tamed, records of unrest persisted. Repeated reports of local disturbances with no clear leader. Rome blamed bandits, but sometimes, just sometimes, it was a midwife, not a mercenary, who started it. You're in a back room now. The healer lays out herbs, one to ease pain, one to numb, one to end entirely. She looks at you and says nothing. But in her eyes is a legacy older than Empire won, that remembers who the real conquerors once were. There were no grand speeches, no banners, but there were consequences. A Roman judge found dead by accidental ingestion. A courier's route inexplicably rerouted. A governor recalled early for reasons never explained. Resistance here didn't shout. It whispered through stone courtyards and quiet lessons. And in the stillness of civilization, these women proved that peace is just a mask rebellion wears when it has good manners. The air grows heavier now, not from smoke or heat, but from absence. You're walking through broken stone, across the floor of what was once a temple, or a library, or both. The roof is long gone. So are the names. This is the chapter of those Rome erased. Their stories are scattered bits of pottery inscriptions that trail off midline murals, scrubbed just enough to blur a face. A woman stands before you, in a fresco, eyes defiant, arm raised, and yet there's no nameplate beneath, just a gouge. Some of these women led revolts. Others simply refused. A few spoke too clearly, or too publicly, or in the wrong forum. And for that, they were written out. Take the Alexandrian fire. Rome didn't mean to destroy all of it, but in trying to subdue a city, they lost volumes of names, scribes, leaders, midwives, philosophers, some of them women who had no other trace left. Or the stone reliefs in North Africa, where female warriors once rode chariots beside kings. Later additions chiseled away their faces, turning them into attendants or decorative goddesses. Revision as punishment. Historians still argue how deliberate this was. Some erasures were administrative lost over time, others suspiciously surgical. The moment a woman outgrew her place in Rome's narrative, the chisels came out. You pass a gravestone, worn almost smooth. The Latin script half lingers, to the memory of, and then nothing. Just space. But sometimes the erasure failed. Folk songs carried names forward altered, disguised, but persistent. A lullaby about a shield maiden in the hills might be all that remains of a general's daughter who led a rebellion. A festival dance imitates steps once used to signal retreat. Memory hides what history tries to kill. So you kneel in the dust and listen. There are no echoes, just a breeze that doesn't quite match the wind. And you realize being forgotten was the final sentence Rome gave its fiercest women. Now we return to the edge of a battlefield, not the one we started with, but one smoldering in the wake of Boudica's scream. The ground is scarred, the heather blackened, and yet someone is still moving through the smoke, because even after Boudica's uprising was crushed, the flame didn't die. It flickered, wandered, and reappeared in places Rome never expected. You're in the Balkans a generation later. A tribal leader's widow rides alone at dawn, not to fight, but to deliver word that the rebellion will continue under new names in new forms. In Libya, a desert priestess burns her own sanctuary after a Roman administrator tries to claim it. Her followers call her Mother of Ash. You see, Boudica wasn't an ending. She was a threshold. These were the rebel heirs, the unnamed, the uncelebrated, the ones who didn't command legions or leave behind statues. But they kept the cause breathing. sometimes literally by hiding wounded fighters, sometimes culturally by preserving outlawed rites or stories of resistance whispered into children's ears. Historians still argue whether these women were inspired directly by Boudica or if their defiance was simply another note in a longer symphony. But there's a pattern that emerges in Roman complaints, more unrest among provincial women, local female leaders stirring spiritual resistance. Another cult with anti-Roman undertones. You pause in a cave by the Adriatic Sea. The walls are damp, but on the stone is scratched a crude symbol, half war goddess, half tree. It matches one found hundreds of miles away. Coincidence or quiet coordination? The women who came after Boudica didn't need her fame. They needed her fury. Not to repeat her defeat, but to evolve it into sabotage art lullabies, escape routes, a rebellion that learned to live underground like roots waiting for spring. And in every revolt Rome stamped out, one question lingered: who taught them to rise again? The scent of iron and bread greets you as you step into a Roman military outpost, not a battlefield, but a town in miniature. Children run past the stone barracks and flags snap in the sun. But look closer. This isn't just a fortress, it's also a neighborhood. And inside it live women, wives, lovers, laundresses, traders. Some were locals. Others followed their husbands from Italy. Some married into the ranks unofficially tucked behind tents and regulations. But all of them shared something unique. They moved between the lines. Rome didn't officially allow soldiers to marry for centuries, but everyone looked the other way. And that blind spot allowed resistance to sneak in through the back door. You sit beside a campfire where a woman stirs stew. To the centurions, she's a cook. To the villagers nearby, she's a relay station slipping out information between spoonfuls. Supply routes, guard rotations, morale issues, all passed along in small talk, folded laundry, or bedtime stories. One tale tells of a woman in Gaul who sold embroidery to legionnaires, while stitching coded messages into each hem. Another in Judea used her position as a medic's assistant to poison rations bound for local militias loyal to Rome. Historians still debate how widespread this sabotage was, but multiple military reports from the provinces mention unreliable auxiliary women and strange patterns of desertion or delayed response during uprisings. You pause outside the bathhouse. The women inside laugh, splash, and gossip. And in that laughter, plans unfold where to bury weapons, which traitor to trust when to light a diversion fire. They weren't generals. They didn't wear insignia. But they moved through barracks like ghosts, listened more than they spoke, and when they acted, the damage was subtle and irreversible. Because sometimes the sharpest blade in the empire wasn't forged in fire. It was forged in routine, wielded by someone folding tunics in the corner and watching everything. Let the world grow quieter, not from peace, but from the muffled weight of unsaid things. You're walking a forest path where every tree has heard more than it tells. Here, language is no longer for poetry or command. It is a weapon, a shield, a code. Rome was a master of control, and with conquest came Latin, edicts, scrolls, census forms. But not everyone abandoned their mother tongue, especially not the women. You step into a longhouse where two sisters grind grain, speaking softly in a tongue no Roman ever mastered. It's not just nostalgia, it's strategy. These women preserve a dialect that's older than empire, not out of pride, but necessity. In Illyria, women whispered instructions for smuggling grain past Roman watchposts, words twisted just enough to confuse eavesdroppers. In the Scottish Highlands, songs passed between generations carried not just lullabies, but coordinates. In North Africa, Berber mothers taught their daughters resistance through stories no Roman ever fully understood. Historians still argue how intentional this preservation was: cultural stubbornness or insurgent fluency. But the evidence is consistent. Where Latin tried to overwrite women, quietly re-inked the script. You read a note written in two languages. Latin on the outside, native script hidden inside. To the guards, it's a receipt. To the messenger, it's a warning: the Romans are coming tomorrow. Even in public, these women played with sounds. A phrase might mean, "pass the salt," or "tonight we move." The line between dinner chatter and battlefield command blurred in a way only insiders understood. Language became the last trench. While men fought and fell, the women preserved syntax like fire in winter, knowing one day their children might need it, not for poetry, but for survival. And when Rome finally left, centuries later, its roads crumbled. Its legions vanished. But the languages those women guarded, they're still here. Now, descend into something stranger, darker. Not the clash of armies, but the scratch of a stylus on wet clay. You're in a tucked-away kitchen, a back alley temple, or maybe just a cave. The light flickers, a woman hums, and beside her a cursed tablet dries in silence. Rome prided itself on law, structure, order, but its subjects, especially the women they tried to erase, found magic, far more reliable. You kneel beside a small shrine where someone scratched a name onto lead, folded it, buried it beneath a threshold, or flung it into a river. The words call for justice, or revenge, or protection. Some of them come from women, scorned, wronged, or simply determined. Across the empire, from Britannia's bogs to Alexandria's alleyways, amulets, charms and clay effigies appear like weeds in the cracks of Roman marble. Tiny weapons, quiet prayers, unregistered resistance. You read one now, a name inverted, burned into wax. The spell doesn't promise fire or lightning. It promises misfortune, sickness, failure, impotence. The kinds of slow creeping punishments that make governors resign and soldiers go mad. Historians still debate whether these spells were superstition or subtle rebellion. But their patterns say something else. During uprisings, they spike. During Roman trials, they multiply. A midwife might slip a blessed thread into a soldier's tunic, one knotted 7 times to bend his will. A priestess might brew herbs that promise clarity while muttering words that guarantee confusion. These weren't Hollywood witches. They were mothers, daughters, wet nurses. And their tools were common wax string ink, a jar of blood-red wine. But their goals? Undermining an empire too blind to believe in the power of small things. And as you turn to leave, you nearly step on a crude clay figure. Arms bound, mouth open, eyes scratched out. You feel something shift, because In Rome's most civilized corners, the oldest rebellions still whispered in spells. The night stretches now soft and long. The fires have dimmed. The stories are nearly done. And yet something still echoes across the hills, across time, across the bones of forgotten roads. You begin to notice them. A carved pendant in the shape of a bird, no known Roman symbol, but familiar to a mountain tribe 2 provinces away. A lullaby sung in a dialect nobody teaches anymore, that ends with a warning about soldiers who come in pairs. A tattoo faded on an old woman's arm that matches a war standard banned 300 years earlier. These are not coincidences. They are echoes. Boudica may be the name that survives in school books, but the women before her and after her left behind traces not headlines, not statues, but rhythm, pulse, texture. You hear it in folk dances across the Balkans, where one step mimics a signal once used to flank a Roman column. You see it in West African rituals, transported by time and survival, that mirror the patterns once taught in Numidian camps. Even in Norse sagas, a whisper of a warrior priestess who never knelt, always walked forward. Historians still argue whether these things count as resistance. But you followed them this far. You know they do. They're not gone, these women. They live on in symbols, in superstition, in stories that don't know they're historical, and in every generation that dares to speak out even softly, even only to each other, something ancient answers back. You sit now at the edge of empire. Grass cool beneath you. A raven croaks once overhead. In your lap lies a story told by firelight for the 1000th time, one of blood, yes, but also of bread, of birth, of stubbornness. And when you finally close your eyes, the last thing you feel is not fear or anger or pride. It is recognition. Your breath slows. The roads go quiet. You followed voices that were nearly lost, traced rebellion in ink, in lullabies, in the weight of a sideways glance. Now, the world softens. The flickering torchlight fades, replaced by the gentle hush of wind through reeds. You're standing at the edge of a river, not quite real, not quite memory. Across the water, silhouettes move women you've met and women you never will. Zenobia Carmelita, the ones who brewed poisons in clay pots, the ones who raised knives under silk, the ones who said nothing but listened to everything. Their hands wave slowly, not to summon, not to warn, but to remind. That resistance doesn't always come with a banner. That survival itself can be an act of defiance. That history's loudest absences are often its deepest truths. The empire is quiet now. Its marble cracked, its statues moss-covered. But the stories remain tucked into songs, carved into heirlooms etched beneath your skin, if you know where to look. So let the river carry those names forward gently. Let your breath move with it. Let your body sink into warmth like parchment curled beside a fading flame. The world will still be here in the morning, but for now, it belongs to them.